If you're like most people in the preparedness community, you've been paying a lot of attention to the current conflicts that are happening around the world. We have the two big ones that we have a lot of takeaways from and a lot of things we can learn from right now, which are the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and the Israel and Gaza situation. Now, both of those are obviously very different, but they do have one thing in common. They give us the ability to investigate and learn from a territory that's currently being invaded. Now, regardless of how you feel about both of those situations politically or ethically or whatever, we can learn a lot from it. So throw all that out the window and just think about some of these topics we're going to discuss right now as related to what those two different populations seem to need the most right now, which gives me something to consider for our own SHTF type scenarios that could occur here in the United States or anywhere else in the world. So I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel, and thanks to them, I can get out on the range, take my AK out, get all the fun stuff like 20 round magazines, which YouTube seems to like for some reason, and do AK things. So big thanks to Midway USA. Now, first let's start with the Ukraine and Russia situation, because that conflict is more of a near peer scenario and might emulate something a little bit more similar to what we would experience here in the West when it comes to being invaded by a foreign force, right? Well, right now, and when I say right now, I mean like just within this last week, what Ukraine needs the most when it comes to individuals, right? We're not talking about military funding or 155 millimeter shells or anything like that. We're talking about what they need on an individual level in Ukraine right this second as a country that's been invaded by a malicious force. Well, what they're telling us anyway in the media is that they need more people. They need more soldiers. They're asking for that almost more than anything else, and they're having a huge issue right now when it comes to people draft dodging and trying to avoid service because, well, in many ways it's basically mandatory there right now, and they've definitely, you know, started using certain tactics which we would think wouldn't even be possible here in the United States when it comes to, let's just say, levels of coercion in order to get you to serve. So, based on that information, after 2 years of war fighting, after 2 years of a conflict with a major superpower, one of the biggest things they need is more people to fight their war. More people to add to their team, right? Now, obviously, they're going to say they also need F-16s, and they also need more ammunition, and they also need more funding, which is just part of the deal. But if it wasn't for the West or for the NATO alliance supplying them with all these military resources, then maybe people wouldn't be the number one thing they need. But because they have the supply chain and because they're getting supplies, what they really need is more soldiers to put those supplies to use with. And that's something that we can actually think quite a bit about when it comes to our own personal preparedness groups and our mutual assistance groups, our own community, or whatever it might be. You might have a year's worth of supplies stored away, right? That's great. But this conflict has been going on for 2 years. And even if you had enough supplies for 2 years, well, at the end of that 2 years, you still might be looking for more help. It might not even be about the food or the ammunition or the batteries or the water or anything else. You might just not have enough help to keep things going. And that's exactly what we're hearing from Ukraine right now, is that they've got all the stuff because, you know, Western nations keep supplying it. They just don't have the soldiers in order to put the equipment to use with. So consider that for your own preparedness, right? Could you last 2 years with a full-blown conflict happening in your neighborhood? That's a big question to answer first. And then, would you have enough help to get through that? And don't forget, and this is kind of more of a morbid thought process to have about this whole topic, but at the end of that 2 years, do you think that every single team member that you have right now when it comes to your mutual assistance group or your community or your family or whoever it might be, do you think all of them will still be alive? Will they all still be alive? Will they have not suffered any kind of medical emergency when maybe help wasn't available? Will they have not found themselves in a precarious situation involving firearms? Who knows? So you really should consider that, especially because we're being demonstrated the need for those additional people right now in Ukraine. Even though they have the resources, the supplies and everything, they don't have enough soldiers. right? And you don't have to think of soldiers as always being people who are going to go to the front lines and actually engage in combat. You might just need more help when it comes to gardening. You might need more help when it comes to repairing your home after a storm. You might need more help when it comes to bartering and setting up some sort of a trade system, right? So there's a lot more to it than just fighting, but we can learn from what's happening there right now and apply it to our own personal situation and try to get some ideas about how that might look 2 years into a full-blown conflict, because that's what those people are actually surviving through right now, right? Okay, so now let's shift focus over to the Israel and Gaza scenario. So Israel has obviously invaded Gaza, displaced millions of people, and a lot of stuff has been happening there, of course, right? Well, for some reason, every time I talk about this, people are like, oh, I see, you're a Hamas supporter or a Hamas sympathizer. No, I mean, I'll just tell you right now, I am definitely not. I don't think anyone should be. There you go. Now you have your answer. But regardless of that, which I don't know why that's such a thing, you guys need to chill out and start learning through a perspective other than the bias that's being pushed upon you by the mainstream media. But that's a whole different story, okay? So anyway, what we're seeing there is that in 6 months, we have a population that already had some humanitarian issues, so that's understandable. So they're more representative of, like, let's say the prepper who just started but didn't really have it together yet, and then SHTF happened, right? They didn't have the time to get it together, so they only have a week's worth of food, or 2 weeks worth of food, and they have some batteries maybe, and they have an extra blanket or two. That's Gaza, right? Ukraine is the prepper who had about like a 6 month to a year's supply of everything, and then also has supply chain logistics coming in on a monthly basis to help replenish it, right? So that's the difference. So Gaza, right, is experiencing this invasion scenario. Sorry, it's very windy and cold out here if you can't tell. It's kind of why I'm running AK right now and USP Compact, the guns that just don't give a crap about weather apparently. But anyway, regardless, Gaza's only been dealing with this for 6 months, right? Not 2 years, 6 months. And in 6 months, they're not asking for people the same way as Ukraine is. They're asking for food and shelter, the bare necessities of life. They are starving to death. A lot of the people there in Gaza are starving to death after 6 months of this situation. Not 2 years, 6 months, right? And millions of people don't have anywhere to live now. So they also have a shelter crisis happening, where are you going to house these millions of people? And how are they going to get out of the elements? And guess what? You know what kills most people in a survival scenario? The environment. Not starving, not dehydration, it's exposure, right? So they are experiencing kind of worst case scenario, somebody who wasn't prepared at all and everything got cut off suddenly. And they're displaced, which means they're now a refugee. They had to leave their home. The thing all of us like to talk about never actually having to do. Well, they had to do it. Sometimes you just have to do it. And where they went didn't have any resources for them. So they're displaced. They had to leave their home. They don't have a shelter. Now they don't have food, and now they're starving. And that only took 6 months. So apply that to your preparedness. And if there's like icicles under my nose right now, I'm sorry. There's not much I can do about it. Are you at least able to handle 6 months of full-blown SHTF? And if you aren't, what happens if a Gaza-type situation happens to you? I don't know where you live. We don't know what our future will bring us. These things are possible. Unlikely, sure, but possible, yes. Will you have shelter where you go? Do you have a plan of where to go? When you get there, will you starve? These are things you should be considering because it's happening to people right now. And these are the things, that the lessons and the takeaways we should be learning from these two different types of conflicts. They are modern conflicts that are happening right now in the present. And if you're only looking at them through the lens of, I don't like this side and I don't like that side and these people did this and those people did that, that's not helpful to you. What benefit is that bringing to you in the sense of being able to properly plan strategically for your own preparedness? It's probably not bringing a lot of benefit at all. But being able to analyze the things that are actually happening to the people in those war-torn regions, and then understand what it is you would have to do to avoid being put in that same situation, could give you some things to consider. And just to kind of do a quick little run back over everything we just discussed, so my brain is just not vocabularying very well today because of the cold, I think. But anyway, Ukraine, you're going to need more people, especially after 2 years of SHTF. You're not going to make it without more people. You're going to need more help, okay? Especially if this kind of stuff is actually part of that equation, because you're going to need more people. Gaza, you better have food, and you better have something figured out in case you have to leave and you no longer have shelter. You better have at least some concept as to where you'll take shelter and how you'll continue to eat once you do. Those are things that I'm looking at these conflicts for and learning about. The rest of it, I mean, it's up to you. Everyone can have their own opinion, but make sure you're learning something from it instead of it just making you upset. Now, I know you guys, people like to ask all this stuff. These glasses are actually called Warbird. It's kind of a newer company, but they want to support the channel. They sent me a bunch of glasses, and they have Ear Pro and body armor and stuff too. So I'll put a link down below for them. And if you use the code MAGIC, you get 10% off. So check them out. They just want to help the channel out, and I appreciate extra gear every so often. And honestly, I just thought these glasses looked pretty cool. So make sure you check that out in the comments below, as well as let me know what you think about the scenarios that are happening there and what you've learned from them, because there's a lot to be learned. And right now, these are the things that both of those people who have been invaded groups are asking for. That's what they need. People, food, and shelter. Seems pretty easy and seems pretty redundant, but maybe we need a reminder once in a while. So anything else you need from me at all, go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.